Of the New England colonies, especially the Plymouth Bay and the Massachusetts Bay colonies. Here are your video goals and vocabulary. So a couple of days ago in class we talked about a couple different religious groups that were in England and that didn't really get along well with one another. And the two groups that probably got along worst in England were the separatists and the Church of England, also known as the Anglicans. So the separatists had some views about religion that were very, very different from what the king and what most people in England believed. The separatists took religion very seriously, and they believed that most people were not good Christians and that most people were not going to be saved. So the separatists wanted to do their own thing and make sure that they could live a good religious life and make it to heaven. The English king, James I, did not really like the separatists because they refused to follow the Church of England. They wanted to do their own thing. So James I sets out to persecute them, that is. He charges them extra taxes, he forbids them to have their own church services, and the separatists cannot deal with this, so eventually they decide to leave. So 102 separatists pool all their money together and they flee England to set up their church somewhere else. For a little while, 12 years, they go to the European mainland, to Holland, and then in 1620 they decide to set out to the New World where they could do their own thing. So in 1620 they arrive in the New World pretty far north in what is today Massachusetts. Things that the separatists do is they write the Mayflower Compact. So this is an agreement that they all wrote up before they actually landed in Plymouth Harbor. And so what this says is it sets up the rules for the community that they're going to establish. And two really important things that they decide is they decide that the colony is going to be governed by the will of the people who live there. That whatever the majority of the people there decide is what they will do. So this is important because it's kind of the beginning of democracy in America. Second, they agree that laws will be written and voted on in open town meetings that anybody can come to. And this also is an important precedent for democracy in the United States. And the agreement is eventually signed by 44 of the men on the Mayflower, not including poor servants, and not including any of the women. And so this kind of shows that even though it's very inclusive and wants to include a lot of people, it's still excluding the poor and women. So famously, the first winter that the Pilgrims spend in Plymouth is extremely harsh, and they almost die out. More than half of the Pilgrims who go there die. Only 44 of the 102 actually make it. Because it's very cold, it's hard for them to grow food to support themselves. But they do manage to eke out an existence and make it through until the next spring. And this is partially because of help received from Native Americans in the area. So even though they do survive, the Plymouth colony is not a really great place for starting a new society. It's not very good soil, it's cold, it's windy, and so for this reason Plymouth never becomes a very important colony. But it is important because it paves the way for other settlers who are going to come over a little bit later. It's also important because of the Mayflower Compact and because it established an example of democratic society in the New World. For similar reasons, are much more successful than the separatists. These guys are the Puritans. So the Puritans also basically are unhappy with the Church of England, and they want to change the Church of England and make it better and more pure and kind of simplify it. But so anyway, the English king doesn't want anything to do with this, so he's not really happy with the Puritans. The Puritans aren't really happy with the Church of England. So the Puritans decide that they are going to follow the separatists to the New World to set up their own colony and set up their own church. And this is the main thing that they want to do, is they want to establish a society where they can have a church the way they want it to be. And so they set up the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And at the center of this colony is a very strict church and a very strict religious system. And what this means is that people in Massachusetts Bay who do not share the Puritans' beliefs about religion were frequently excluded from politics and could be exiled from the colony, or sometimes, even worse, arrested or killed for not sharing those beliefs. So the major city in the Massachusetts Bay Colony was Boston. And this was their main city, and it grew very rapidly. It was a very good spot, it had a very good harbor, and it became a major trading center. So anybody who wanted to come up and do business would go to Boston and do it there. Also, the citizens of Boston worked really hard, and they worked for the good of the community because they were all committed to this church and really wanted the church to succeed. On top of this, and perhaps most importantly, there were many, many more Puritans in England who were willing to come over and help the Bay Colony. And in the next 20 years, thousands and thousands of Puritans head over from England and help the Massachusetts Bay Colony to grow. And Massachusetts grows and grows and eventually merges with the Plymouth colony to form one big colony known as Massachusetts. And Massachusetts remains one of the biggest and most important colonies all the way up until the War for Independence in the 1700s. Hopefully you can answer this stuff now and you know what these vocab words mean. See you guys tomorrow.